Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this exciting launch event here at the SEforALL Forum in Lisbon, Portugal. My name is Jem Porcaro. I'm the Senior Director of Energy Access at the UN Foundation. On behalf of the UN Foundation, I'm really excited to be launching the results of the 2017 Energy Access Practitioner Network survey results. This is the latest in a series of surveys that we've been conducting since 2012, really for the purposes of shedding light on the emerging opportunities and challenges in the distributed energy access sector. Hopefully most of you are familiar with the Practitioner Network, but if not, we were established about 7 years ago really as a platform for elevating and unifying energy access practitioners around the world and serving as a platform for exchanging ideas, resources, information amongst practitioners around the world. Since we were established, we've grown to to incorporate about 2,500 members, representing almost 1,400 enterprises working in over 170 countries around the world. So we are truly a global network. A few things to note, you can follow us on Twitter at Energy Access PN using the hashtag EAPN Survey 2017. You can obviously pick up hard copies of the survey results here, and of course the report is available online on our website, energyaccess.org. So I'm really happy now to introduce my guest, Alexie Seller, who is the CEO and co-founder of Pollinate Energy. Pollinate Energy is a social enterprise that's doing some really exciting work providing sustainable products to some of India's urban slums. And I think as of today, actually merged with Empower Generation, so that's really exciting.
Exactly, it's really awesome news for us to be joining forces with another great distributor who's empowering women around the world.
That's fantastic, so this is really timely, and congratulations. And so Alexie's kindly joined us to share her thoughts on some of the survey findings, particularly some of the gender findings, which we're going to talk about in a second. So a little bit of background on the actual survey itself. Thanks to many of our members, we got about 168 responses, which is a good representation of the sector as a whole, as further detailed in the actual brochure. These respondents came from a wide variety of organizations, from a wide variety of geographies. Also, for the first time, we had a special section on gender, which I'm going to chat a little bit about with Alexie in a moment. And also, like previous years, we have different segments within the survey covering the various sectors within the energy access market writ large, including appliances, cook stoves, standalone solutions, and mini grids. So with that, there was a lot that we learned in this survey, and I'm not going to do it justice by going through all of it, but I wanted to touch on one of the key themes that merged from the survey results, and that is the issue of access to finance. We found that across the board, really practitioners said that a lack of access to finance was one of the biggest barriers to the growth of their respective segments of the sector. And that really was true across the board. Practitioners said that, industry, investors, policymakers, so on and so forth. And it really, I think this is one of the issues that we'll be talking a lot more about in this forum and the months and years to come. Interestingly, the one subsector where finance wasn't per se the number one issue, that was mini grids, where actually finance along with policy kind of shared the billing for the top barrier to growth. In addition to access to finance, we also found that practitioners are having a difficult time mobilizing finance. And as this slide shows, a significant share of practitioners reported that they are waiting 1 year and more from the time they actually start a discussion with an investor to actually signing a deal. So these delays, coupled with the amount of time that CEOs take to actually find capital in the first place, really contribute to slowing down the sector. So at this point, I think I want to switch gears a little bit. I mean, there was a lot in this survey. This was just a couple of themes. I really encourage all of you to look at the report online. But I want to pivot a little bit, Alexie, and talk a little bit about some of the gender-related results that came from the survey results. And this is one of the first ones, and it shows the share of women in various roles within an organization. And perhaps, unfortunately and not surprisingly, we found that men really fill a disproportionate share of roles, particularly key decision-making roles within enterprises. As a CEO, co-founder of your own organization, what are your thoughts on this generally? But then also, what advice would you give other organizations, and maybe even the industry writ large, about how to increase the participation of women, especially in key decision-making roles?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting finding, Jem, and what we see here is probably also what we see in the corporate sector, where women are falling more into marketing teams and maybe HR roles, but not direct sales or leadership and decision-making. Our learning at Pollinate, I mean, personally, was also interesting because as a woman CEO, I expected to be able to attract a lot of women to our organization, and that wasn't true as a hypothesis, and we have to be very proactive about finding women. Often you're dealing with internal bias in the team itself, and they're hiring people they know and understand, which may be men. But we've had to set up a number of systems, like ensuring that we get women to final recruitment rounds for every role that we're going out for, actively setting targets inside the company to hit certain percentage rates, and looking for young women leaders who we can start to elevate and give stretch projects to accelerate their growth. And I think if you're not proactive about it, our understanding was that it doesn't happen. You need to make an effort, and it's not enough to just expect that women will fall into these jobs, because there are so many problems around them that are restricting them from getting there.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think this issue of being proactive is really important. I mean, along with yourselves, companies like Peg Africa, for example, have really recognized this as being a big issue and have proactively adopted a policy to get women in more key decision roles. So I think that's a really good point. Yeah. Maybe if we can go to the next slide. This is another one of our findings. It shows the perceived impact of having women in leadership roles within enterprises. And we found this a little bit alarming and surprising. We found that about almost 30% of respondents said that they believe women to have a neutral role or are unsure of their impact in leadership roles. I find that interesting. I mean, what do you attribute that to? Do you think that's mostly a reflection of cultural and societal norms and biases, or is there something else at work here?
I mean, I think this is more, the question's interesting, like a perceived impact may be difficult for someone inside an organization to actually see and tangibly tie a result to. So, I mean, if I had that question, I would also, I'm not sure, it's difficult to say, oh, there was a man and then there was a woman and now we've had this kind of impact in the organization. I think what's important to look at is that about 60% say it's positive. Yeah. No one said it was negative. Right. So to me, that's a good result. And then the other kind of question that we're raising right now is that really we shouldn't be talking anymore about whether women have an impact in organizations. I think it's pretty clear for all of us who have women in leadership roles. The institutional studies done by McKinsey, et cetera, of the world have proven that it's incredibly powerful and businesses profit more with women in leadership. And so I'd say this result is probably, people not seeing it immediately in their surrounding environment, but I thought that was positive, that most people think it's the right step. That's
a good point. That's a very good point. Maybe that's a good segue to the next slide, which shows the share of organizations in which women are involved in product design, kind of getting a little bit more tangible. We know that this is an issue, particularly in segments of the market like the cook stoves market where women are the primary users of the products, and therefore it really is important to have women's considerations, as part of product design. We know that organizations like Barefoot College and others have done a lot of work to encourage women in the engineering design process. Are we doing enough? Are there other kind of tactics and strategies that we ought to be thinking about in terms of getting women involved in kind of the design side of the business, especially for those that are, in the product segment?
Well, I mean, I think judging by that result, we're not doing enough. I mean, not having women as your primary design influences for something like a cook stove is it's like designing a laptop with someone who's never used a computer before. Like, why would you not have the person who's using it as your central test case of whether that product makes sense? And we see this with cook stoves, and it's been a frustrating. We tried to sell those products for 5 years, and we still feel like every time we put one out there in the market, the women come back and say, my pot doesn't fit on this, like it gets flimsy when it's hot and it's meant to withstand heat. And those are basic design concepts that are not being factored into a lot of product ranges out there. So,
but you're finding that that's even happening when you do have women involved in the design process, or is that a result of not having
I think of not having the right, and user design. I think the other challenge with cook stoves is that women around the world all cook differently. And I think in the solar market, we see solar lights largely transferable across sectors, and there's not that much difference between products in East Africa or South Asia or Latin America. But cook stoves are very different from North to South India or from village to village. So it is important that there are women involved and local women who know how to cook for their families and what they need.
Well, that's a very good point. And I know we could go on for hours and days talking about this, but I think we're going to probably have to wrap up. This was really just meant to kind of be a teaser of what else is in the survey results. I really encourage all of you to download a copy at energyaccess.org. Thank you to all of you for joining, especially Alexie, for sharing your perspectives on the report, and have a fruitful couple of days at the forum.
Indeed. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you.